Sephora stores are everywhere you are. So just pop in. When you need a brown lip to match your 90s playlist. A confidence boost before your interview? Or a last-minute gift for mom's birthday. There's always a Sephora near you. Just pop in. Use our store locator to find your local Sephora or Sephora at Kohl's.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of Black creatives, changing the world one story at a time. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with some amazing Black writers and creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that we think and write about. The guests on this podcast are writers of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, music, plays, and so much more, as well as creative guests whose work is all around writing joyful narratives on history's pages. So if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. I hope that you're enjoying the season so far. I would love it if you subscribe to the show and share your favorite episode with a friend. Also, please join the mailing list. You'll find a link in the show notes or over on the website www.writingblackjoy.com. I have some giveaways this season that are only available for folks who are on the mailing list or following me over on Instagram at Writing Black Joy, including books by some of this season's guests, Writing Black Joy card decks, and more. So definitely get on that mailing list and follow me over on Instagram. Now, on to today's guest. Today, I have with me Karen Roswell. I met Karen earlier this year in a call related to a class I took in the past, and we got along instantly. Since then, I've seen her work in action as an amazing photographer and coach. And in addition, she is the photographer behind my new cover art, and we had such an incredible photo shoot a few months ago. Working with Karen before the photography session was incredible, as her work is deep and transformational. Her practice, both as a photographer and coach, is very rooted in values, both hers and her clients. She believes in the power of collaboration, and as a result, her work is highly collaborative, particularly as she considers the dynamic between a photographer and the person being photographed. And this also comes into her work as a coach and into her ideas, some of which we explore in this episode. Karen and I have spoken a lot about the narratives that are portrayed about Black women in art and photography, as well as the narratives that we tell ourselves, and she believes in rewriting those narratives. And this is what brought us to this conversation today, and I knew that I had to have her on the show. Here are some of the things that we talk about. Attitudes she has seen in women and how they feel about having photos taken, her journey as a photographer, the narrative she discovered being told by and about Black women in relation to photography and art, and how the photographer's narrative is often based on their own understanding as opposed to the subject of the photo. How these narratives can shape what people think of us and what we think of ourselves. How her own life experiences have shaped her photography in wanting the narratives to tell the full spectrum of the human experience. How images can impact the person looking at them, how photographs reflect the photographer and how understanding this shaped her own photography practice, and so much more. I love this conversation and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. I am so excited to have you. As I would have mentioned in the intro, I worked with Karen quite a bit recently on a lovely photo shoot, and some of the photos should be out and about by the time this episode drops. But Karen, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is because I know that you have a real commitment to changing narratives, particularly for Black women. So tell me a little bit about what led you to this body of work.
Well, thank you for having me, firstly, is what I want to say. And yes, it was great working together with you, Sophia, especially because when we first met and we'd met on one of those online platforms, and you mentioned the aspect of the fact that having photography was like something that you just didn't like to do. And to me, that signaled oh, we gotta have a conversation about that. We need to disrupt that narrative that what I often hear so often from women is they don't like having their photos taken. They don't look good in photos. They want to change themselves in some way, either before the photography or via digital means of being AI or things like that, edited in some way. Yeah. And I always say, but wait a minute. When you go when you meet somebody in person and when you go somewhere, do you sort of edit yourself there too? Like, people see you, they know who you are. And that line of questioning or thinking that I have has been right there at the beginning of my photography. And I studied photography I think 22 years ago now. My daughter was 2 or 3. She was at play school, and I'd gone to a local library, and there was a camera club with photos exhibited that they were exhibiting, and I had a little wander through there. Then went over to the children's section, and we read books. And at the same time, I had got my first camera. That it was my auntie. My auntie is my mum's sister, oldest sister, and she'd left this camera. She'd emigrated to America, left the camera here in the UK, an SLR, so a film camera. And I picked it up and I instantly like the feel of the camera, like looking through the lens, didn't know diddly squat about how to do photography. So the first few films were quite wasted because of technicalities.
Not wasted.
Well, we're used up exploring. You do learn that you can't waste film because it's not a cheap commodity. So
I was going to say, this was back in the day. I used to use my dad's SLR camera, and also we were in Barbados, so it did feel like a waste because you had to spend all this money to develop a whole film, and if you only had like 5 pictures that were nice.
Exactly.
But Dad looking at me like, girl.
Don't just, not like now, right? With your phones or with digital stuff, it's just like snap, delete. Like back in the day, you had to really be considerate about what you're photographing. And yeah, for real. And I think that lends itself to the way that I do photography now anyway. It's like, I'm not just like clicking away mindlessly. I'm still thinking, what is it that I'm looking at? What is that? What are they wanting me to capture as I'm looking at them too? Like I said, I'm very collaborative. So 22 years ago, seeing this camera club images, starting my own photos with this camera from my auntie, did a few films. And then I realized, like, wait, I did a comparison of some of those early photos that I had taken and what I'd seen at the library in this camera club, and kind of was like, I think I can do that. I think I can do what they were doing. And it started from there really. And I found a evening class and went along, to an evening club, to a club where they were doing black and white printing, and I enrolled on their like course. I think it was like maybe 8 sessions, and it's like a bit of a hobbyist thing. And I did that course 2 or 3 times. Like, they taught you a bit more, and they taught you a bit more, and they taught you a bit more. Then you had people come into the studio, and now you're photographing random people in the studio because you're getting the practice of using film. Now we're in black and white film, processing film, printing film. Oh, it was beautiful. I just thoroughly enjoyed doing this type of work. Now, here's the thing. That particular evening class group thing, they were closing. They couldn't sustain the course any longer. And the tutor said to me, or the guy that was teaching it said, you should apply to the local college. They've got a course there. You can do an A-level in photography. And so I went along. I went and inquired about that, signed up. And that's when the fun really began. Because, so here I am now. I'm a single mum. My daughter is now 3.5, 4. I'm going across to the local college. I'm doing an A-level in photography. And I got to tell you, Sophia, it was a bit surreal. I mean, there's one thing going along to a hobbyist club where you've got people generally like, adults who are there with, and you talk about whatever, then going into an A-level class where it's predominantly students who are much younger than you or were much younger than me and who are now, they want to photograph everything that's moving. They want to try this. They want to try that. And this is where I started to notice that everything I was photographing was very much centered around my life and what I was doing and who was in my life. So there was family, there was friends, there was my parents. It was just very concentrated on that. So then when I was getting assignments to go do, go into the town center and photograph what you see, it's like, why? Why would I go and do that? But I was like, okay, let me go do that. And I'm smiling because when I look back at those very early photos, what I really enjoyed was the transformation from what I had captured, processing the film, and then making sure that you process it effectively so that you're not ruining the film, because you can take your roll of, you can do your roll 36 frames on that film. If you're using a 35mm camera, which I was mostly, less when you're using a medium format camera, you probably got like 12 shots there. But then you've got to process that film. And if you don't know what you're doing with the chemistry, those shots could be gone.
I know. Oh my gosh. I've been there.
So all you've got is the memory of what you took.
The camera in your mind. The camera in your mind. I love
exactly. That. That's all you have.
And I think it's something I'm hearing coming out from what you're saying already was a realization of how your images tell a story. And I think, you said the images that you were taking, that was the story of your life, right? Your family, it was the people around you, the people in your life, friends and stuff like that. And, if you're just going into town and taking random photos, like, it almost sounds to me like you always had that idea of intention, in terms of your photography, like what am I we may get into the language around it later, because I like you have like the word capturing always feels a little bit, I don't like it. But just that idea of like, what am I taking these pictures of? What am I seeing in the camera? And what story am I telling with these pictures that I've taken? And like I said, it was a story of your life, which I really like. At what point do you think that you started to see the relationship in terms of narratives that are told through photography about maybe women in general, Black women specifically? At what point do you feel like you started to notice that or started to think about that in relation to your own photography practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think quite early on, I didn't have the language to articulate what I was experiencing, but I knew it. I knew that when I was in these, like when I was at college doing my A-level, I went on to do a couple of courses like a HND and then eventually a undergraduate in fine art photography. And I would say that probably quite early on. So as I was saying, I photographed mostly my family, my friends, the people in my circle, and it's mixed, right? It's not specifically all Black family members. We have a mixed family. And what I noticed that when I got feedback with like in the educational spaces, the feedback that I was getting about my work never actually spoke about my subjects. It was about the technicalities of what I was doing or why. And then, but then one of my tutors, New Zealand, his name was Brett, but it was also his boss, Sue, probably was the first who started to really understand that I was doing narratives in my photography. And I would say that it was between Sue and Brett, they really tried to nurture what is it that I'm trying to say with my work? But what was also interesting in those early pieces of feedback was they were projecting a narrative onto me that wasn't my truth.
Mm.
And that was very curious for me. Now, here's the thing that I want to just be clear on is you mentioned my intentionality earlier on, and I would agree that I'm perhaps very intentional, but here's why. I'm very intentional because for the most part, I was in spaces where I would have been the only Black person, Black
Mm-hmm.
female, predominantly white people are around me, and in my educational spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a very early age, I would have been very intentional or known that that I was being seen or being looked at, even though I couldn't necessarily know it. I knew I was very visible.
Absolutely.
And so then comes this intentionality. Like I said, it wasn't something that I was conscious of, but when I was younger, but certainly I was aware that there is intention with what I am doing because there's going to be feedback. And by the time I'm now starting to study this tool, because to me, photography is a tool, and it's a tool that can be very powerful because it can create narratives that aren't even there, even just down to the way that you light somebody, or you bring in more shadow, or you bring in more light. It creates a narrative that can go in many different directions. And there's something about, going back to this feedback piece, there's something about who's behind the camera and who is in front of the camera. So speaking directly to your question now with that and context in mind, what I started to notice was, as I was researching photographers, because you're encouraged to do that, to look and see, and you're really encouraged to look at a wide variety of photography. When I started to notice Black women, and then specifically Black women, the writing around the image, because quite often there's some caption or some title or a little blurb around it in photography books, or sometimes there's not, but quite often there is. And you start to recognize that, photography is very subjective.
Mm-hmm. And
what I was starting to notice and by this point, I'm now at university, because you don't really go into this in such a deep way when I was doing the A level. Although, as I said, Brett and Sue were encouraging lots of different ways of me to think about photography. Yeah, I started to notice that the way that Black women were described or talked about was very different to my lived experience as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this really is about the photographer who, in early photography, not exclusively, but very much majority of early photography would have been white men. And early photos of Black women, they spoke about them in for me, a very uncomfortable way that was like, and I could talk here about, we could go into talks around, like you mentioned the language in before of being captured, to capture a picture. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of crossover between the capturing of somebody on a image and the capturing of somebody, it's like there's different connotations to that capturing of somebody who's going to be forced into being enslaved, or being owned in some way.
Yeah. And I what I'm hearing is that power dynamic, as in the photographer. And this is something I think that struck me early on when you and I would have conversations, before we did the photo shoot. You would have conversations about your own philosophy, which is very collaborative. Whereas I think traditionally, photography was very much, it replicates power dynamics that are seen everywhere. You have the photographer who is the person who's holding the power and who's who is kind of almost determining the narrative. And that happens, you know, for me, I'm like, I would see that when I would read books and how, again, how women can sometimes be described, things like that. If it's a man has written the book or vice versa, how a woman might describe a man or whatever the case may be, that that person is directing the story that is told. They're directing the narrative. And that narrative is then going out to other people who may be observing the photo or reading the book about the photo. As you said, you're doing your research. So you may be looking into a textbook or something, and you have the lived experience to read it and be like, yeah, I don't think so. But there are going to be other people who don't have that lived experience who are going to be reading it. And that's going to be shaping their idea about what is true for, a Black woman.
And I want to add there, including Black women themselves.
And that's such a good point too, because you have women who are internalizing the narrative that somebody else has written about them. Right. And I think part of the reason that I think this is important is because I think imagery is powerful, right? It's powerful because seeing an image is like, it's almost like, I almost want to say it's like seeing yourself. Like I think about my niece when she sees a picture of herself, she's like, ooh. And it's like, it's that really powerful thing of seeing an image of someone who looks like you or reflected back at you. If you are then taking in a narrative about that, which is negative, and you're internalizing that narrative, then it can shape how you feel about yourself and how you feel about other people that look like you. So I'm curious then, because you obviously, and I know quite a lot about your work, and you obviously were seeing these narratives or reading about these narratives, or we're going to have to talk later about these flowers. I'm going to have to put a link. Karen has this amazing video about Black women holding flowers in photography. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes because it's hilarious.
Wait, when you say hilarious, in what way? Like,
when I say hilarious, what was hilarious to me, I've never seen these Black women with flowers before. So when I saw it, I was like, what is going on?
What's going on? What's happening here?
So I say hilarious in the sense that, like, it almost seemed ridiculous to me that this was a thing.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So I was like, what?
Exactly. To me, it was
listen,
you hit the nail on the head.
I think just for the sake of the listeners, let's just explain this a little bit, because otherwise they're just going to think that we're keeping a secret to ourselves. So tell us a little bit about the flower, because I think that will lead nicely into you telling me about the narrative the sort of narrative that you envision. But tell us a little bit about these flowers.
So I had to do an assignment. This is where this particular project came out. And it's a short film called Flowers. You can catch it on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And the flowers, an unconventional study of self. That's the full title of it. An unconventional study of self. And what I did was so I mentioned earlier that I'm a researcher. That's a big part of how I just walk through the world, researching many things. And I can go deep into researching something for a bit. And I started to notice, talking about like Black women, where are we visually? Where are we in museums? Where are we in paintings? Where are we? And what I noticed was that in art history, because there's a link between art history and photography history, that Black women in the images have flowers. They're either arranging flowers into a vase, or they're holding a flower. They could be amongst, I'm thinking about one particular painting where it's from the pre-Raphaelite time, where there's white women all around. And then there's this Black girl who's holding this flower. And I remember speaking to the lecturer at university at this point, and asking her, and I'm doing my master's at this point, right? And I'm asking her, like, what's the significance of these flowers? So she gives me an explanation as to what they are. I won't share with you what she said, because my explanation to this was, no, actually, I will share with you what she said. She goes that flowers are representative of sex and the symbolism is that therefore the Black women in these paintings are seen as exotic and again, feeding into this narrative, which is like, I can't remember the last time I walked around feeling exotic.
Just a bunch of flowers in your hand.
With a bunch of flowers in my hand. Like, don't go buy no flowers because now I'm exotic.
Hilarious.
There's something within that, right? There's something which within that which says, in order for me to be connected to that sense of the symbolism of the flower and me as a Black woman, I've got to also consider myself through the lens of whiteness and what a white person might see of me. And that was just, I don't have time for that.
No.
Who has time for that?
And I think I laugh because sometimes I think to myself, like, it sounds ludicrous. Am I the only person that thinks this sounds ludicrous? Like, it's almost, it's like,
You know,
we want enough to know it's not funny, but I'm just like, how is anybody
really? Yeah,
seriously?
exactly.
Like, it sounds completely ridiculous. And I think a part
but then here it is. It's like, it does sound ridiculous. It does require like inquiry into like why, when I'm reading about this, I'm just like absorbing it as a fact. And so when I started to think about my film, I decided, okay, well, what would that model like? And also the women that I was seeing in these paintings across a couple of hundreds of years, by the way, I'm like, is it the same woman? Am I seeing the same woman in different places? Like, what's going on? And it's not, but it got me, it ignited my imagination to think, if I was the photographer, I'm looking for a model to come hold these flowers, what would I need to know about it? So in my film, Flowers, an Unconventional Study of Self, I imagine the models having their own lives and going for an interview, and what sort of questions might they be asked about, and what can they do? And in the movie, it's actually family members, my daughter and my older sister, who, and I'm taking them at different periods of life, but they're kind of, and it's interesting that there was this moment when I'd asked them to put on some lipstick. I love lipstick. Put on some lipstick, and they did exactly the same thing in exactly the same way without even knowing it. It's only when I was cutting and editing it, it's like, oh wow, they did exactly the same thing themselves. But then the hilarious aspect for me in this Flowers film is that it's kind of like the model representing she says, you know, I asked the question around like, what's your experience? And she then starts to reveal that she can do cubism, she can do modism, she can do modernist work, she can do, different types of genres in art, just to kind of represent that, you know, across the evolution of art genres, like there we are with flowers, just like that's what we can do. And then,
yeah. And I think it says a lot, you know, it's one of those things. It happens even now with, you know, Black women and women as a whole, this thing of like, you know, a woman can be super qualified, and people are going to talk about what she was wearing and all of this. And it's just like, you know, I can do all these things, but can you hold this bunch of flowers though? Like,
yes.
Let's narrow it into the really important thing.
Exactly. And how can you hold them? Can you show me the different ways in which you can hold them so I can really be sure you know how to hold flowers?
Yeah.
Oh, it was such fun creating that. And then I layer in different types of music for it as well to kind of take the viewer through like the different periods. And there's some very dramatic music to, you know, I'm holding the flowers very dramatically and look at me. And
I'm sorry. I just,
I'm so
that video. I laugh.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you seen it and that you had this, experience with it, because I tell you, when I first showed it in university, people looked at me like, I don't get it.
Oh my goodness. But Karen, academia is wild, okay? Let us be clear on that. Academia is so wild. Oh, that's a rabbit hole we will not be going down today. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the narrative that you are hoping, you know, I know, I almost feel like I could go at this in two different directions, because on the one hand, I feel like you have you have a narrative that you want to create about photography itself, but also you have narratives that you want to put out there about, Black women through your photography. So let us start with the.
Well, wait, I'm curious about that first one. Like, I have,
in the sense that, like I said, when we first spoke about it, you really talked about making photography very collaborative, and giving a lot of agency to a person who's having their photograph done or being photographed, as much as them having agency as much as the photographer having agency. So to me, I almost feel like that is almost more around the process of photography as opposed to the subject of the photography itself. So I'd love to talk first a little bit about that, and then about the actual, we talk a bit about the narrative more around Black women and the photos that are taken. So tell me a little bit about how you think about photography. Because as I said earlier, there's a real power dynamic that has always been in place with photography. How do you think about your photography as the person holding the camera?
Oh, good question. Good question. I think about photography like it's a tool, and I am very collaborative. I am very much the way that I think and the way that I sense things, the way that I move through the world is visually. I'm very visual in the way that I show up. And so photography really lends itself as a tool in order to help me communicate. And as I was studying photography and photographers, I got really curious about, so then what are Black female photographers saying and communicating through their work? And I remember having this conversation a long time ago. I also studied curating contemporary art, and I had an opportunity to meet with the director of the museum in Harlem, who had said to me that if you really are interested in this work, and at the time we were talking about curating, but there was also an overlap of photography in there for me. She said, the conversations have already started. What are you adding to the conversation? And that always struck me as like, yes, what am I adding to the conversation? And so this made me think about and consider, with that sense of intention again, around this narrative. If we're in a conversation, that means it's not just me, it's me and the other person. And then we could be creating something that then is involving a third person, as in the viewer. So there's me, there's the person who's working with me, or I'm working with them, and then there's the viewer. So when we are creating this photography, what is it that we are actually wanting to communicate? And have we considered this and the balance of that as it goes out there? And like you said at the beginning, Sophia, you're going to be dropping your images soon. And, you're a writer, right? So it's like I was really considering and thinking about, where does photography meet writing for you as a writer that also then speaks to the people who are going to be listening in or are going to be looking you up? And what does your photography need to say for that? So that's some of the things that go on in the background for me. And how am I adding to the conversation? So if I'm present to the fact that historically the conversation and the narrative of Black women is predominantly told through the imbalance of power, then I feel it's only makes sense to me to bring a sense of balance back by eliciting. And I'm kind of pausing a little bit because I hadn't ever really considered why I do what I do and the way that I do it in this way. And there's a reason for that. In this way being one of the significant things that happened to me in my journey of photography was my father had passed away quite suddenly. And that shifted the way that I approached photography too, because it made me realize that, my God, I'm never going to be able to photograph him again. That opportunity's gone. What I have left is the images. And I can look back. And as you know, our minds will, we store so many memories away and thoughts away and feelings away in the backs, in the recesses of our minds. And then you can see an image or you can see a visual and it all comes flooding back, right?
Yeah.
So me saying about how I do photography, like now, I hadn't really considered this before, but it's important to kind of, I feel it's an important piece to express because it's the full spectrum. Now, the full spectrum of humanity within us is what I'm adding to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm so inspired by the work of Carrie Mae Williams, the work of Lorna Simpson, Michaelaine Thomas, Deborah Willis. Whew. Just even considering their work, they enabled me to question what I was seeing, to question how I was seeing it, to question, like, when I was looking at Black women through the lens of white men, that was actually jarring me in some way. It was causing some disruption to my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was reminding me of something that I couldn't put my fingers on because it was deep in there. When I started to look at the work of those women that I've just mentioned, the photographers that I just mentioned, I was also being affected in my nervous system, but in a completely different way. It was like, there was like a hallelujah, like, you know, like there was like an awakening and an opening within me that was expanding my sense of self.
Yeah.
And that was really curious for me, like, what is going on there? And then when I did my undergraduate, degree and had to do my dissertation, I did it around the fact that as the photographer, the person behind the lens having this power. And I'd come across this very early photographer, a white male, who had photographed, I selected a series of images of like 3 or 4, maybe 5 images of the same woman that he'd done studio shots with. In Deborah Willis's book, which is on the history of Black women in photography, I may have got that name wrong, of the book, but I saw his name in her book, but it was of a Black model. And I was like, oh, hold on a minute. And then I started to research again, like, so let me see what else he has done. Because in Deborah's work, she's focused on the woman, not the photographer.
She's focused on the women who are being photographed.
Yeah, the woman who's being photographed. Okay. And it was like, and I saw like it was the same photographer's name. So then I was able to kind of look at the two different examples of same photographer, Black woman, white woman, same photographer, written about, the Black woman's written differently to how the white woman's written about. What was curious to me though was like, oh, this guy has got a thing for the nape of a female's neck. This guy's got a thing for the cleavage and the cleavage line. This guy's got a thing for a certain way of photographing, and this guy's got a thing for having a certain distance to the photographer, to his subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I was very curious about that. Like, oh, so I'm beginning to learn more about who he is as a photographer.
Yeah, just from looking at those photos.
Just from looking at doing a comparison of the two photographs, and that changed everything for me. It's like, okay, this really is about the photographer. Photography is about the photographer. Photography can be about he who holds or she who holds the camera.
Mm-hmm. So
I decided that if I'm holding the camera, then we're doing it collaboratively. Yes, I happen to be. It's like we can't all get into the car and drive all at the same time. Mm-hmm. We can have an agreement on where we're going, where should we stop, where, all of that stuff, but only one person can actually effectively sit behind the wheel. But we're all going. So to me, that's how I started to think about photography. Is that, okay, I am actually the one who knows how to use this camera in the way that I want to do it, but the rest of it, it's open to how we all want to get there.
Yes. And to give a share of that power, and, even in equal shares, dare I say, to the person who's having their photograph done.
100%.
Which I love. because I think so, as we said earlier, so much of a narrative is shaped by the photographer and their willingness to share that telling of that narrative with the person who's having their photograph taken. Sometimes that doesn't happen.
Well, I got a question for you. Like in our photo shoot, there was this moment when I'd asked you to stand in a certain position and sit in a certain position. Oh. And I remember feeling like that wasn't, this isn't okay. But you were so gracious because you were still yielding me the power. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't okay with me. And but I could see and I could tell that narrative of, but I've got the camera. It's going to be up to me what I do was being transferred from you. And it was like, I remember thinking, no, this is not how this is going to go down. We got to figure this out. But we can't always talk these things through. I would love to talk everything through. I'm a bit of a talker. Get me in the right mood. But, I want you to just share with me, like, how did that feel for you when that moment happened and it changed?
So I think, this is from my perspective, and I think a part of it is that I feel, even when I'm not comfortable about it, I feel like, you're the expert, not just because you're the photographer, but because I guess you are used to photographing business owners, in a way that highlights their brand, etc. And so I'm like, in my head, I'm like, if you're telling me to stand this way, there must be a reason for it. So I'm willing to do it. But I think one of the things that you're very good at is kind of sensing, okay, you're not comfortable with this. And not, as you say, that's not okay for you. That's not okay for you. So it's not a matter of, you know what? This is the trend now. Everybody's standing with their hand in the air on a photo. So, it's not, you're not almost pressuring me to subject myself to some sort of trend in photography or some sort of pose that you think would be ideal for a website or whatever. But it's almost like this is, as much as it's my brand, then I have to feel comfortable in how I'm having the images taken. And I think it was a nice reminder. Let's put it that way, because I think, like I said, for me, in my mind, I'm just like, you know what? I'm uncomfortable anyway. So, I'm just going to yield to whatever you suggest, because this is your field of expertise. To me, I think it's a reflection almost of the coach in you as well. This idea that as the person whose brand it is, I hold some expertise in that conversation as well.
Some?
Me.
Wait, what? Did you, viewers, listeners, did you just hear Samir say, in my own business branding, I hold some expertise? It's like, honey, you are the expert of what you do.
Yes. And I love that. I love that because I think it's obvious. It's also rare. Right? It's also rare. So I love your sort of process, real collaborative process within photography.
Yeah.
Now, I have got a couple of other questions I want to ask you, and you and I, we could talk all day. So this may not have been the best.
We really can.
But, I do want to ask a couple of questions. One is about values. Now, so before we wrap up, one of the things I want you to do is just tell us a little bit about how you work, because that was very fascinating to me. I know, because I worked with you, that one of the things we did early on, before we even talked about, because I thought, okay, someone's taking my photo, it's a brand photo, and I thought, like, I was expecting you to be like, tell me about your brand colors, da, 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 like all of that. But you were like, tell me about your values. And that was just a surprise for me. So tell me a little bit about how you see the relationship between someone's values in their business and in their life when you're going to take their photo.
Okay. So it was really interesting. It was really interesting when just to make this about you and I in this moment, right, of working together, and the questions around values is, first of all, Sophia, you were like, very, very certain I hate having my photographs taken. I'm not going to like it. I'm not. There was lots of like the I'm not gonna when it comes to photography. Now, this is not unusually said, right? Like, of course, this is not unusual, to hear that when you are also thinking about professional photography. There's one thing to have your own camera on your phone and be like, you can decide how you're going to do and what you're going to put out. But here you are. So what you talked a lot about was, and also what you talked a lot about was that like, it was just, good luck, Karen. Good luck.
Good luck, Karen. Good luck.
Good luck with like trying to get me. And your first argument to me in a conversational way, not like in an aggressive way. Your first argument was, I'm a writer. I'm a podcaster. Why do I even have to be seen?
Oh, listen, and I'm sorry. I want to segue into this. We're going to come back to the values, but this is so important because, this was a conversation that we had. And I remember saying to you earlier that, I was really upset because I posted this picture on social media and I was saying something about my podcast or something like that. And everybody was commenting, oh, you look so cute in the photo. And I was just like, never. I don't who cares if I look cute? Like, nobody's listening to me if all they can see is if all they're doing is commenting on how I look. Is anybody hearing what I am saying? Tell us your response to that.
So this brings that nicely back into I wonder what your values are. I wonder what values that you have. And it's different to what are your beliefs? What are your opinions? But what are your values? Because for me, the way that we show up, I think can be really expressed and seen by others through what we value.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think, it was really helpful, but I didn't anticipate how helpful it was in the beginning. Like I said, I was expecting it to be like brand colors and whatever, but you were more like, you wanted to see what was important to me and find a way to then bring that into to us working together. And I thought that was a really nice way of doing it. So I love that. I love bringing the values in, and I actually found it fit together quite nicely, even though I couldn't see how it would fit together initially when you were like, tell me about your values. And then, like thinking about what was important to me personally. And, you and I both kind of see the link between someone's personal values and maybe their business values, especially if they're a small business person and they are at the heart of their business in a way. So I think that's a really important piece, but I was surprised when you brought it in. So the other thing that you brought into the process of us working together was the music.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed that. Tell me a little bit about how music fits into your work.
Oh, you're getting all the juicy stuff out of me today, huh?
I love it.
You remember that time when you're listening to that piece of music that you really enjoyed and you're there, like, I don't know where you were, whether you're dancing, whether you're in the car, whether you're just finding yourself singing along. One of the things that Bob Marley says is that one good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain. That quote to me is so significant within my work, because knowing that there is historically a uncomfortable, maybe even painful relationship with photography and the Black female body, I feel a big part of my work and my process is to do what music can do, but through photography. So when I bring music in, and it could be different types of music depending on who I'm working with and what we're talking on at the time. Sometimes the music can do that piece of healing work or opening somebody up to reveal more for themselves around what is it that's stopping them from enjoying the photography. What needs to be dissolved a little bit in them, or just seeing from a different perspective. And I got to tell you, Sophia, you mentioned that I do personal branding photography. I do, but I do it in a way that like, I hope my intention is that after you've worked with me, you will go on to work with whoever, you will feel differently about photography in some way for yourself. I'm not saying that after you listen to this, after not listen to this, but after you do some work with me that you are forever changed. I'm just saying that I hope that somehow I've enabled a deeper conversation with yourself.
Mm.
And
one of the words that came up a lot during our sessions, that was actually what I was thinking about earlier. That was what was in the back of my mind. So one of the things that you said early on in our sessions that we talked a lot about, or that we mentioned quite a bit about within your research, is looking at what you call the rupture. And I feel like there's a part of me that feels like you're thinking about the rupture that has occurred due to a lot of the narratives that will have been portrayed about Black women. And I almost feel like your process is about repair, like almost the two sides of that. Tell me.
That's interesting.
Tell me if I'm far off.
Well, I feel like that's a really beautiful way of saying it, rupture and repair. And inevitably in many conversations, ruptures will happen. There will be the disagreements, there will be the different ways of understanding something, and one might consider that to be a rupture, but then real work comes in is, okay, so how do we repair that? And, sometimes a repair can be, I'm sorry for what I said. That can be the repair. Sometimes the rupture can happen in so many different ways. And yes, I am considering if somebody starts the conversation, oh, you're a photographer? Oh God, I hate having my photograph taken.
Mm-hmm.
There's the rupture right there.
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to say to that? Oh, thank you. Thank you for hating having your photograph taken.
Yes. Thank you for hating my work. I love that. Listen,
and that's the thing, right? And that's the thing. It's like, that's not my work. That's got something to do with you.
But also, I think,
it's also my work.
That's also your work. That's also your work. And one of the last things, obviously the podcast is called Writing Black Joy. And one of the things you talked about earlier was this idea of restoring humanity, restoring whole humanity, I believe were your words. And that is how I feel about the podcast, because I feel like if previous narratives about a group of people have been very one-sided, it can remove the humanity from that group of people. And I feel like my work is around bringing a story that may not be told very often, that joyful narrative, because I feel like you need that as a part of someone's wholeness. A person's never just going to be a single story. That's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she talks about the danger of a single story. A person's never a single story. They're a multitude of stories, right? There's pain, there's joy, there's anger, there's play, there's all those things. Full spectrum. And I think not having the joy there is you're doing a disservice to the group of people. Where do you see that coming into your work? Do you see bringing joy? I know early on you said to me, I'm not here to make you enjoy having your photo taken or something.
Oh my goodness. But I do remember that. That there was this moment where I just said to you, I'm not here to make you enjoy photography. And I remember you looking at me like, wait, what?
What am I here? No, I'm just joking.
What am I here for then?
Yeah, but tell me what do you feel like there's a place for bringing that joy into your photography? What are your thoughts on that?
So the short answer is no. To your question of bringing the joy into my photography, the answer is no, because I already believe it's already there.
I love it. Oh, that is brilliant.
And the work that I do in my process is to go find it. It's like diamonds, right? It's like the diamonds are created deep in the ground, like gold too, deep in the ground, and it's not bringing it into the world. It's like finding it.
I'm bringing it out.
And bringing it out.
Oh, I like that. All right. So thank you so much. So before we go, I have a new segment on my podcast, which I'm trying out. And we're going to see how that goes. It's called the Joy Five. So I'm going to put a timer on for 5 minutes. I've got a series of questions, and we're going to just see, almost like a lightning round, how many of them we can get through.
Oh, I'm excited. What have we got?
So tell me what's bringing you joy right now.
This conversation, of course. This conversation. I love talking about photography in all its different facets. So this is totally bringing me joy right now.
I love that. Tell me, is there anything that you want to try just for fun? It could be in photography, but it could be in life in general. Something you want to try just for fun.
Yeah, I do. One of the things I want to try is skydiving.
Really?
Yeah.
Not what I was expecting you to say at all. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I've always wanted to do a skydive. Tandem. Don't get me wrong. It's never going to be just me on my own. But a tandem skydive, that is something that I don't know. There's something about, I just want to be able to
fly.
No, not so much the fly, but the feeling of flying. Yeah. Like through the air, and I don't know. That would be it. It would be a tandem skydive.
I love it. Tell me what returns you to joy. What returns you if you're, if you feel like you're depleted, what returns you to it?
Oh, good question. The first thing that popped into my mind was I've got this little video clip on my phone of me feeding a giraffe. I did that last year for the first time. And I actually do like a little skip, like a little, so excited, and the joy that this giraffe this magnificent animal is like taking this bit of food from me. And I skip, I do a little skip, and the moment I think about that, I'm right back there with the joy.
I love it. I love it. And tell me about something that always makes you laugh.
Ooh, good company. Good company. When I'm around like those people who we connect on so many different levels. Inevitably, I am laughing.
Yeah.
Inevitably, I'm laughing.
I love that.
And my husband, he cracks me up. And my daughter. I mean, not in any particular order.
Yeah. So good company overall.
Good company overall. Yeah.
Love it. And tell me then, last question, what's something you're dreaming about?
Oh, Sophia, this is a question that, I struggle with. Gosh, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well,
that's interesting.
I'm going to leave that question with you then, and you'll go and think about it. One of the things you and I don't know if this is something that you're dreaming about. One of the things you and I have talked about is, your work, with Black women. And that is, I know you said earlier that I said that you did brand photography. I never said that. And I purposely never said that because I don't think that's what you do. But I think it's hard sometimes to describe what you do if it encompasses so much. So last but not least, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your process and the kind of person that you love to work with, just in case one of those people is listening and they think, oh, I love the sound of that, Karen. I want to take my picture. So tell us a little bit about how you work and what your work is from that perspective, given that it's not strictly brand photography.
Yes, my work is a combination of a few things. I would say at the core of my work, I have a deep connection to bringing forwards and out into the world that sense of humanity, the beauty in humanity. And given that we are living in very challenging times with so many horrible things happening across the world, and I intentionally say that because as much as this is about joy, we talked about the full spectrum. And there's a few things within my work that come together. And I'm a coach, as you mentioned already.
100%, yeah.
I use photography as a tool to express our ideas and communicate and help people communicate their work. And quite often the type of person that I work with, their work is very head based. It's they may be coaches themselves or writers. It's like people who use their creative or imaginations a lot, and that comes then across in their work. It's something that isn't always so tangible, but it's deep and it's effective and it's impactful. They're the types of people that I work with best. And also quite often, they are also the type of women who may be at a point in their career where they are a good 20 plus years into their careers. They may be starting to shift in their directions of where they're wanting to go, but they're not leaving their work behind, all those skills and expertise. They're just pivoting. And there may be a sense of, I don't know what that looks like. And one of the things that I'm present to is that I'm particularly good at understanding how we take what you do know and shape that into a visual narrative to help others understand that as you're pivoting, so that they know that you come with this track record of what you do. I was talking recently I did a photo shoot recently with a leader. So quite often I work with thought leaders, and this business owner incredible woman who, as we were doing the photography, and also incidentally, I work with everybody in different ways. It's not like a set process of, okay, I'm going to do, we're going to have 2 or 3 conversations and then we do the photography. It depends. It really depends. And what somebody needs. So this particular woman that I'm speaking about, we had probably 2 half-hour conversations before the photography, but I do know her quite well. So that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. But actually on set in the shoot, what I brought out in her awareness was that as a thought leader, she could go even further into what she was doing and how she was expressing. And we did, she trusted me to be able to do that, because that's also a big part of, the people that I work with, is that we establish trust, because I work collaboratively. So I've got to be able to trust you. You've got to be able to trust me. Mm-hmm. If any of what I'm saying resonates for you, then then I'm probably the type of photographer you want to work with. It can be a really slowed down process, because like I said, I'm from old school ways of thinking about photography of when I use film. So it's rarely going to be a click, click, click and let's see what we just delete. It's generally a methodical and being in your body kind of process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Intentional.
Yeah.
Good way to describe it. And, yeah.
Intentional and intersectional in my photography.
And intersectional. I love it. So, thank you so much for joining me, Karen. This has been, as usual, as always, a really great conversation. So many things I could have asked, so many places we could have gone, but I'm really glad we got where we got. And I love it. I look forward to chatting with you, off camera, off mic.
I look forward to seeing those photos of yours drop. I cannot wait.
I shall be dropping. I decided I was going to drop them around to announce the new season. So, yeah, you've seen some already, dear listener, or maybe you go and search them out. But I enjoyed that experience. So
thank you too.
Yes. Yeah. So thanks, Karen. Thanks, listeners. I'll be in your ear soon. I'll be with you again soon. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.